Hello, in this video we are going to try and create a similar pattern to this in Substance Designer. And before we do that, let's try and analyze this image. So we have some different colored squares here, and one thing you can see if you carefully look at the image is that there is a relationship between these squares. So we have some big squares, medium and smaller squares, and 4 of these smaller squares make up one medium, and 4 of these medium squares make up one big square. So we're gonna try and layer that in Substance Designer, and we're gonna do that in a way that it looks pleasing to the human eye. So let's get into Designer, and the first thing I do is to change the resolution to 4K. And then I will hit tab and bring in a shape node. Here I have a square as a pattern, and I'm going to decrease it a bit. And the next thing I want to do is to round off the edges of this square like we have here. For that I will use an edge node. And I'm going to increase the edge roundness. Next, I will blend these two nodes together. And at the blending mode, I'm going to choose multiply. And this way we get only the inner square, which is beveled like this. Next, I'm going to try and scatter these bigger squares using a tile sampler. So let's bring in a tile sampler. I'm going to connect this to the pattern 1. Let's choose pattern input from here and set the X and Y amount to something like 6. I'm also going to increase the scale, so we will reduce the gap between these squares. Let's leave it at 1. And what I want to do next is to remove some of these squares. And I will do that using a custom mask, which I will plug here at the mask map input. And for this mask I will use a Gaussian noise with the scale of 2. And I'm gonna choose seed number 6. You can choose another seed if you want. And then I will use a levels to enhance the contrast on this image. So I will drag these 2 sliders and enhance the contrast. Let's plug this into the mask map input here, and from the properties I'm gonna increase the mask map threshold. And this way we got rid of the squares which are on the black area here. Next I want to create the medium squares. For that I will duplicate this tile sampler, so press Ctrl D. And here from the X and Y amount I'm gonna set this as 12. And this way we get 4 medium squares where we have one big square. I can bring in a blend node and show you what I mean. So this is what we get. But that's not how I want the blend to happen. This is just to showcase that we have four medium sized squares instead of one big. And here from the tile sampler I will decrease the scale so it matches the big square. Let's decrease this to maybe 0.8. Or 0.85. Right, I'm gonna delete this blend and we are gonna try and blend these two shapes in a moment. But first I will go up to this first tile sampler and add some grayscale values to all of these squares by increasing the color random here. And then I will add a threshold node, and with this threshold I get back the binary mask that we had here. And the reason I added some grayscale values to all of these squares is because I need to create a mask in a few moments out of this tile sampler. Next I will blend these two shapes, so let's bring in a blend node. And I need an opacity mask here, which will specify how I want the blending to happen. And for that I will have another threshold node coming from this first tile sampler. And because we have some grayscale values here, I can use this threshold and delete some of these squares. Now let's plug this here into the opacity mask, and our blend works according to this mask. I'm gonna go back to this Gaussian noise here, and I want to get rid of these two dots, so I will try and play with the disorder here. I'm gonna leave it as it is for now. Next I need to create some smaller squares. For that I will duplicate this tile sampler here and change the X and Y amount to 24 by 24 because we doubled the value that we had here. And now I need to blend these smaller squares with this. For that I will need a mask coming from this second tile sampler. So I will go here and add some color random. But if I do that, then we're gonna have some issues here at this first blend. So I need to add a threshold node here also. And this will do the job. Okay, so let's bring in the blend which will blend these squares with the smaller squares. So as I said, I need a mask coming from the second tile sampler. So let's bring in another threshold. And with this threshold I can delete some of these squares. Let's choose multiply. And maybe reverse these connections. So I got an issue here. In fact, we have two issues. One is that we get these lines around the smaller shapes, and the other is that we got these patterns inside our bigger shapes. So for that, I think I'm gonna delete this threshold and instead bring in a float fill here, and then I will assign some different grayscale values to this threshold. So float fill to random grayscale, and here I will use a threshold and delete some of these squares. Then I connect this here to the mask, and we got rid of these exterior lines from here. Now I need to delete these patterns from the bigger squares, so for that I can bring in a blend here, and I'm gonna subtract these squares from this blend. So let's choose subtract, and let's see, and this works perfectly. And now we got all of the shapes. We got bigger size squares, medium and smaller size. I think I'm gonna increase the size of these smaller squares. Maybe to something like 0.95, and then I think I'm gonna remove some of these so we don't have too many of these smaller squares. For that I can use the mask random option here. Okay, so now let's play with these values and get some more or less of these medium shapes. Let's see, I can do that from this mask also. And I can also play with these threshold nodes. With this one I can delete some of the bigger squares. With this one I can delete some of the medium squares. And I can also go here and use the mask random feature. Or I could go to the first tile sampler and choose a random seed for this. And you get all kind of options to play with. Okay, now let's get to the coloring part of this. So I need a gray background color for this pattern, so for that I will have a uniform color. And I'm gonna sample a gray color from this image. Then I will have a gradient map, and I'm gonna try and sample some of these colors. Let's connect this here. So before I can use the gradient map, I need to assign grayscale values to all of these squares. So first let's do that. I'm gonna bring in a float fill, connect this here, and then I need a float fill to random grayscale, and this will get us some grayscale values for these squares. And now I can use the gradient map to sample some of these colors. Let's try and include all of these colors. So I'm gonna sample something like this. And here I need to increase the contrast a bit so I can delete some of these sliders. And bring these sliders a bit closer to each other. And this is what we get. Let's try and blend this with the uniform color and see what we get with the gray background. So let's bring in a blend here. And I need a mask here to specify how I want the blend to happen. And I will have this as a mask, as it is a binary image. And I need to reverse these connections, so I will select them and press X. And this is how it looks. I like the result. And there is one more thing which I want to do, and that is to add some shadows to this side of the squares. So for that I will drag a connection from this binary mask and bring in a shadow node. Let's arrange these lines a bit. And I need another blend here. And then I need a gradient map because this shadows node is recognized as a grayscale node. And I need to blend this with the color map. And here from the blending mode, I'm going to choose overlay and reduce the opacity. And this is what we get. I can also go back to this uniform color and maybe decrease the value if I want to darken the background. Then there is one more node which I need, and that is a blur HQ. Maybe something like 0.2. And this is what we get. I like the result. I can also go back here and adjust these sliders if I want. Then I can also go back to this Gaussian noise that we used as a mask map, and I can choose another seed from here. I can get all kind of different shapes. And I could also play with disorder here. And this is the final result. It looks similar to what we have here. And I hope that you found this video useful.